Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield myself as much time as the mic can consume. I think that there is universal agreement among us in this body that No Child Left Behind, the most recent iteration of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, needs to be replaced. And I think a lot of folks have the same kinds of concerns I have about the Student Success Act, many of the provisions in that act. One of my major concerns, and again, I think a number of us in this body can share these concerns, is that the bill lacks focus on or support for rural school districts. That's a big issue. I was raised in Iowa myself by a single mother, and I've represented rural parts of Iowa for the last 8 years that I've been in Congress. I served for 8 years on the Education and Workforce Committee, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I miss my time there from time to time, although I'm enjoying my time on a new committee. But this is an issue that I think is something that gets overlooked. I think that a lot of folks in this body, really through no fault of their own and certainly out of no malice on their part, simply don't recognize or understand the needs of rural parts of our country, not just in Iowa, but around the country, and certainly the needs of rural students. And I think I find myself as a former educator often educating my colleagues to some extent because they don't seem to understand sometimes, folks on both sides of the aisle, Mr. Speaker, that poverty is not just an urban problem, that it's a rural problem as well, and it does exist in rural areas. And I don't think we should deny the fact that fewer students from rural areas complete college than their urban counterparts as well. In fact, this gap is growing wider by the year. Again, these are issues that, if we think just a little bit, we understand exist out there in our society. And a large part of the problem is that rural students face unique challenges and barriers to access to resources. For example, many rural students may not have a proper internet connection, if any at all, let alone enough bandwidth, or a computer at home. So it's even more important that they're exposed to technology in school. We know about technology and how powerful it is in vastly expanding the educational options and opportunities available to students in rural areas, providing these students with a cutting-edge 21st century education regardless of geography. And at the same time, technological tools have the power to transform the typical classroom experience into one that is more student-centered and it provides teachers with more accurate information and feedback on student progress so they can better address the needs of struggling students, something all of us would like to see happen. And also, many rural schools have a smaller workforce to draw from and struggle to find teachers for a wide variety of electives or advanced coursework. The students in these schools, I have no doubt, and I think most folks in this body have no doubt, would benefit tremendously from the use of technology to deliver and supplement and personalize instruction and provide opportunities to these students they may not have otherwise. This amendment that I'm offering is a simple one. It's supported by the National Education Association, by the School Superintendents Association, by the Alliance for Excellent Education. It would simply support the expansion of the use of digital learning through competitive grants to partnerships to implement and evaluate the results of technology-based learning practices, strategies, tools, and programs at rural schools. Mr. Chair, it's time for Congress to start paying more attention to rural communities. That's the bottom line. As co-chair of the Rural Education Caucus, I encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment and to provide students in rural communities with the same digital learning resources as students in larger school districts. And I hope that we can vote for this amendment. I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you, Mr.